Good morning.
Whenever we sit down to meditate, or whenever you sit down to meditate, remember the purpose of it. There is locked up inside of your being the whole presence and power of God. The whole of the Godhead bodily is locked up in your being, just as perfume is locked up in a flower. And it is only as that flower opens that the perfume, the aroma, escapes. And then we have a room filled with beauty. Every individual on the face of the globe has locked up within his own being the allness of the Godhead bodily. Not a part of it. You can't divide God. God is indivisible. God is infinite, but God is indivisible. You cannot divide God. The allness of God is in one tiny leaf. The allness of God is in every tiny leaf. The allness of God is in every individual on the face of the globe. Otherwise, there would have been less of God on earth when there were only 10% of the population that we have now, or perhaps there would be twice as much God on earth when the population doubles. No. There was just as much God in the United States of America in 1876 with its tiny population as there is now. The infinite allness of God is wherever one individual is. One with God is a majority. That is why it is said that one Christ can lead 1 million people into heaven. Where they just use the word million as a figure, they could just as well have said 100 million. Because one Christ can lead the whole world of men and women into the kingdom of heaven. Because one Christ is the infinite individual Son of God and shows forth all that God is. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine, was not addressed to any collective group, but to an individual. All that I have is thine, the allness of the Godhead bodily. But you see, we are not demonstrating that. The world is not demonstrating it because that is locked up, not in our humanhood. Nothing of God is locked up in our humanhood. There isn't a single trace of God in any human being. God, in its infinite allness, is embodied in the spiritual Son of God, which is that center of our being, which is our spiritual identity. And that is why we, as human beings, do not have the grace of God. It is only as we learn to turn within and let this imprisoned splendor escape. Let this activity of the Christ, this beauty of God, this presence of God, this power of God, as we let it escape from us, then does it come into visible being. There is a review of the genius of Chinese art, and this man reviewing brings out that the author, well, let me read. This is a quotation. with his usual charm and understanding of things, no, that's wrong, with his usual charm and understanding of things Chinese, Maurice Cullis traces the genius of Chinese art through its chief mediums, explaining that the Chinese artist never tried to express himself, but made himself a channel for the one life force, that it might manifest beauty and harmony through him. You know, if this man were writing the book The Infinite Way, he has done it in one paragraph or sentence there, hasn't he? The whole of our existence is not to express ourselves or do right thinking, but to be a fitting instrument through which its glories might appear. Then we can say with the Master, I can of my own self do nothing. The Father within me doeth the works. Then we can say with the Master, my doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. Then we are never trying to express ourselves. I've had the experience of bringing this out with people in public life by showing them that in public speaking, never will they achieve the success through expressing themselves or expressing their personalities or their gifts to the same extent that they would if they just read the subject and the verb and the object of every sentence and tried to deliver it. Because then they would not be expressing themselves, but they would be expressing the intent, the beauty, the poetry of the author, of the creator, of the poet, whatever it might be. And so it is. We will never fulfill ourselves in life by trying to express our individuality, but rather by letting this infinite invisible bring itself through into expression. Now that's what happens every time that we meditate. Every time that we meditate, it is as if we were to say, Father, I have no wisdom, and I have no power, and I have no judgment, and I have no health, and I have no wealth. And so I'm sitting here to let infinity flow. And in the moment of that click, in the moment of that instant of realization, all that imprisoned perfume begins to flow. Now, it would be a mistake to look out into the world after feeling that click to see what happens. It is too much like the practitioner who was grateful when the fever went from 104 to 102. That is not our function, to watch the changing pictures, but to abide in that inner realization and then let the new harmonies appear. Because we are not really dealing with changing 104 fever even to 99 3/5. What we are watching for is the birth of the Christ, not just the appearance of a healthy human, but the birth of the Christ as your individual being. There is no attempt ever in sitting here to change sickness into health or lack into abundance. Always in sitting here, the vision is that there is one invisible Christ here and now, the center of your being. It's the same Christ here or here. And as our vision is on the unfolding of that Christ, it appears outwardly as a much better or healthier or brighter or wealthier human being. But we are not deceived by appearances, since we weren't looking for a change of humanhood, but rather the dying of the humanhood and the rebirth of the Christ. Now, one of the major points in the message of the infinite way is that no good can ever come to you or to me, and that it is just foolish to sit back and wait for any good to come to us. Good flows out from us. And so it is that love is, of course, that which produces all of the good in our experience. But it isn't a love outside somewhere that comes to us, nor is it a love in someone else that caters to us. It is a love within ourselves that we express to others. The love has to flow out from us, not to us. The coming to us is but the reflex action of the going out from us. But if it doesn't go out from us, it cannot return to us. The tide that comes in is the tide that goes out. When it goes out, it comes back. If it doesn't go out, it can't come back. And so it is with us. There are those who really believe that out here in the world, or out here in God, that there is some good that can come to them. And there really isn't at all. There isn't one bit, except in the sense that we could go out and hang coconuts on a coconut tree. But that wouldn't be intelligent. It wouldn't be sensible, and in the end it wouldn't benefit anybody very much. But since the coconuts, in order to represent supply, must flow out from the center of the tree, so must our supply, whether it's economic supply or health supply, happiness supply, anything, must flow out from the center of our being, because we are at the center of our being as infinite as God. The whole of the Godhead bodily centers itself in our individual being. And so there's none outside of us to come to us. It all has to flow out from us in order that it may return unto us. Now, last week I had occasion to write a letter on that subject, someone asking what my thought is about tithing. I have a beautiful thought about tithing, but I rarely express it because it is so easily misunderstood. It is made use of for one's personal gain or the gain of one's church as a rule. And for that reason, I rarely speak of it, but here and now I can. Tithing is a tremendous blessing when it is pure. When it is a giving, makes no difference whether it's 10%, 5%, 20%. When it is a free will giving without a single trace of thought of return, when it is pure gratitude, then tithing, well, there again it would be like the righteous never are known to beg bread. No one who ever tithes can ever lack. But then they must be careful about that, because truth is a two-edged sword, and it's just as apt to cut one's own throat as another's. And so when tithing is done with any sense at all that there is to be a reward or a response or a return, then tithing becomes a sin. It becomes a business. But tithing from the standpoint of gratitude for blessings already received, when tithings have to do with the past, not the future, then tithing is a blessing. Well, now, the principle of that is exactly the principle of the infinite way. When we pour out from the center of our being, not for a return, but with the idea that since we're infinite, we have plenty of it to spare, whether it's service or whether it's dollars or whether it's consideration or whether it's forgiveness, as long as it flows out without any sense of a return. But now, let us take the next shocking step. This is the truth about prayer. Any prayer that has within itself a single trace of a desire to receive something from God, get something, achieve something, is no longer prayer. There's the old word P-R-E-Y instead of P-R-A-Y. Do you see that? It is the most shocking thing when you first realize that all of the ordinary sense of prayer is really a sin instead of a blessing. It really brings down on the one who prays the wrath of God instead of the blessing of God. No prayer must have in it any element of desire for good to be received. Good to be realized? Yes. Yes. Because the infinity of good is already where I am. The kingdom of God is within me. And prayer has a legitimate purpose in bringing that good into conscious realization and demonstration. Not getting good, letting good. That's the object of prayer, that we may open ourselves to let the good flow from within our being. Now, when prayer is understood as an opportunity to let flow instead of an opportunity to add something to us, then prayer approaches its higher element. You see, the nature of the ultimate of prayer is, first of all, communion. Communion, just in the same sense that we might sit here together for an hour, 2 or 6, or we might go over to the beach with a basket of lunch. Not for any purpose, just to sit and commune with each other, to enjoy each other's company. That is a true stage of prayer, communion with God. Not to get something from God, certainly not to give anything to God. Certainly not to enlighten God, certainly not to influence God, but merely for the joy of communion. Now, the world has cheated itself of the most tremendous experience there is in all life. If you think that there is something wonderful about a period of communion with your mother or your father, sister, brother, sweetheart, husband, or wife, you don't even know the beginning of the joys that takes place when you achieve a communion with God. Believe me that then the world is well lost. And it isn't realized that it is possible to commune with God as literally, as actually as we are sitting here in communion with each other. Now just think if we were to be still, that is if you could get me still for that long, and just be at peace for 10, 12, 15 minutes, without a desire for healing, without a desire for enlightenment, without a desire for help, just for the sake of enjoying the beauty of that outdoors or whatever is indoors, then you would soon see the true nature of prayer, because that communion leads to the culmination of prayer, which is oneness. And in that oneness, there is no longer a communion because there are no two. There is only one. That one is God expressing itself, revealing itself, fulfilling itself. And in that period, there is the height of spiritual experience. Up to that point, there is the highest known joy of the human world, that is communion. When the human being, an individual, can commune with God, can so rise above humanhood as to desire nothing of God, want nothing, seek nothing except the feeling of communion, then prayer is achieved. But let us remember this, that prayer, while it has in it one trace of desire is not prayer. Prayer, like tithing, while there is one iota of thought of gaining something, of having a return, is, of course, neither tithing nor prayer. Now, that is fine as it comes into this idea of living with God, communing with God, bringing God into our actual daily experience. But there must be helps, there must be aids on the way toward attaining the right concept of prayer or the right demonstration of prayer. And these aids are given to us for experience first with each other. Before we can ever come to the communion with God on any great extent, momentary flashes of communion can come to anyone at any time. But the real living and moving and having one's being in continuous God consciousness cannot come until a certain measure of life has been achieved in living one's relationship with other people. And now here we are given a guide. How do we live in relationship to other people, in our spiritual life, in our inner life? This has nothing to do with what would appear outwardly. Outwardly, our lives are like everyone else's, and those looking on, not knowing, might not perceive any difference. But those who do know would see a difference and know the difference, and of course the result would be entirely different. Now here is our basis for our living, first of all with each other, then with the people of the world. And you then see why this mode of living leads ultimately to a communion with God itself. To us, it is as if there are no other people. We, first of all, look upon ourselves as individuals who have to establish a relationship with God. It is very much as if I were to say, here I am alone in the world, alone in life, without family, and without business. And now what am I to do? How am I to live? How am I to get along on this plane? And the first thing is that I must establish and maintain my conscious communion with God, since there isn't anyone out in the human world to do anything for me. It must come from God. And so I must learn to live without regard to anybody on the human plane. I can't look to them for my good, and I never was a New Dealer, so I can't look to the government for my good. And so I have to find within myself a contact with God, so that I will know that at all times and under all circumstances and at whatever age I may achieve, that I and the Father are one, and all that the Father hath is mine, and it must be through this relationship that I live and move and have my being. I'm enabled in that way to look to no one on the outer plane. I keep my vision there. When I'm living humanly, I live as everyone else does and have my friends and whatever it is out here. But inwardly, I'm looking to no one for anything, not even for gratitude, not even for remuneration, not even for recognition or reward. All of that, there's a secret place in here where I achieve a feeling of oneness with God and feel, Father, if I'm to have it, it's your will and your way. Thy will be done in me as it is everywhere else on earth. Now, if I can maintain that relationship with God, there will always appear children of God, that is, those who are in some measure receptive and responsive to God, to be instruments of God to share with me as I share with them. My sharing with them doesn't mean that they haven't access to the same oneness that I have. Their sharing with me doesn't mean that I haven't an access. It only means that on the human plane, as Paul says, it is given to one to be a minister and another to be a doctor and another one to be a nurse and another one to be a teacher and so forth and so on. And in that manner, I may have the grace of God flow through me in one relationship to you, but the grace of God may flow through you to another relationship with me. But if I look out there to you, then I cut it off. I cut off every possibility that you will ever be good to me if I look to you for it, because that would be like looking to the coconuts that we pin on the tree. Do you see that? But if I maintain my own conscious union with God through the realization, constant realization, I and the Father are one. The place whereon I stand is holy ground. God is the law unto my being. God is the lawgiver. God is the enforcer of the law. God is the creative principle of my being. God made me and sustains me, feeds me, and so forth and so on. Then in that, I open the way for the activity of God to flow into me through anyone and everyone receptive and responsive. All right. How then does that affect me when those out here may do evil unto me or despitefully use me? Now watch that, because here hinges a very big point in your demonstration. Our attitude toward those in the world who do evilly unto me or unto each other is ignoring it. Since we have been given the grace of the cosmic law, revealing one selfhood. Now watch this cosmic law. It has its expression in the 25th chapter of Matthew, in those passages leading up to, inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me. Aha! But then it follows, inasmuch as ye have not done it unto the least of these my brethren, ye have not done it unto me. Now just remember then that I have no concern for you because, or the world, since I am doing unto the least of these my brethren, it is as if I had been doing it unto myself. And so anything that I have done for another really and truly has been done for myself. Then I must watch the next one. Inasmuch as I would forget or neglect to do this good for another, it has not been done unto me. So I myself then have cut myself off from my good by my withholding. And so I look out on this world at those who are withholding kindness, justice, tolerance, mercy, so forth, and say, you are not doing anything to me. You're not even doing any harm to the world. Inasmuch as you are not doing it unto the least of these, you are cutting your own throat. That is the cosmic law. My good flows unto me from the Father through the good that I am led to let flow out into the least of these my brethren. And so my good is the return action of that. Now then, those that do not do likewise are no concern of mine. Never can they injure me or you. Only in proportion as you are looking to them for good can they do unto you evil. The moment you are not looking to them for good, they cannot do unto you evil. And you have no right to look unto them for good. Your right only is to look unto the Father within you. Now, Whatever the attitude of an individual towards us or to us is strictly their demonstration. Do you see that? Strictly theirs. Has nothing to do with us. If they act in accord with good, so is it unto them. If their actions are contrary to good, the reaping of discord is likewise unto them. None can do good or evil to us, since our demonstration is purely God in action. We have submitted ourselves to the law, government, and control of God. Therefore the will or acts of man, or the thoughts or deeds of man, never touch us. They do react upon themselves. We are responsible only for our conduct toward all, and this must be in accord with the great command of love thy neighbor. Love thy enemies. Pray for them. Forgive 70 times 7. Rejoice in those who let God use them as instruments of good. Never fear or hate those who are against the divine law, the cosmic law of the one self. We can say, as the Master did to Pilate, thou couldst have no power over me unless it comes from the Father in heaven. And so it is. Our lives, you might say, are insulated from the world. We're in the world, but we're not of it. We are insulated. It can neither do good to us nor evil. All of the good comes from the Father within me. It comes through every individual on the face of the globe who is receptive and responsive to God. Every tiny little bit of good that there is in our individual consciousness comes back to us through every individual on the globe. That's why God being infinite, God appears infinitely as people. But wherever there is a trace of God in an individual, they are the bearers of good to us. What good? The good we have loosed into the world. If we haven't loosed it into the world, it cannot return to us, because those who are carrying good are busy carrying it to those who have loosed it. Doesn't that bring up a scriptural passage? Cast thy bread upon the waters. Cast thy bread upon the waters. You first have to let loose of that bread before it can return as cake. Stones can return as bread, bread can return as cake. Do you not see this? Only as we make our contact with the Father, live in it. Live in it seriously, as though we expected no good from any individual on the face of the globe, and yet let God's good flow through us, not as if we were being good to anybody, because we haven't that power to be. We haven't that power to be. If we wanted to be, we couldn't be, because we have no good of our own any more than a teacher has any truth of his own or her own to give out. It is the truth which is God, which an individual may loose to the world, and that truth, which is a blessing to those who receive it, comes back. So it is. Watch. Our relationship with God, yes. Our conscious oneness with God constitutes our oneness with all spiritual being and idea. And the moment we have made our conscious union with God within, that good begins to flow to us from all of these outside sources from all over the globe. That is why there is no way to watch what's going to happen in the outside world, because we have no way of knowing how the activity of God, or through whom the activity of God can or will appear. And always it is the activity of God, not of a person. Don't you see that? It is only the activity of God that can grow a tree. You say, oh, a person did it. No, they didn't. The person had nothing to do with this except be an instrument of God. Only God can grow a tree. Do you see that? But the moment we realize that only God can do that, then every individual comes bearing gifts. Why? Because every individual is an instrument for that flowing of God. But if we look to that individual for it, it's cut off. And so the wives who look to husbands, and the husbands who look to investments, and the business people who look to the public, they're all looking amiss, all praying amiss. Business comes from within one's own consciousness. It doesn't flow into a business, it flows out from a business. How? The moment we have made our realization that all good is from the Father within, and that it doesn't come to us, it flows out from us. And inasmuch then as we have done it unto the least of these, my brethren, it is flowing back to us. And of course, whatever of the negative nature that we do unto the least of these, my brethren, has a way of coming back at us through a million individuals and not merely one. Cosmic law is not only a most wonderful subject, but a terrible subject. It's like the old idea of the Hebrew god of wrath. And incidentally, that is where the idea of the Hebrew god of wrath came from. Actually, God is a god of wrath if you think of cosmic law. Only it isn't God doing it, it's our lack of fulfillment of cosmic law that is reacting upon us. But some of the translators or interpreters of Scripture thought it was God doing it instead of the evil of the people returning unto themselves. Now the Master saw that. That's why the Master could say, forgive 70 times 7. That's why the Master could say, neither do I condemn thee. But he could also say, go and sin no more, lest the worst thing come upon thee. Why? Because he knew that the violation of cosmic law brings its own destruction. That is why it has been said that truth is a two-edged sword. It is. There's always one edge resting against one's own throat. Because unless truth is fulfilled, truth rebounds against oneself. And we can witness that out in the world of today. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. That is the cosmic law said in another way. Now you see then that the right sense of prayer has nothing to do with bringing any good to us, since if we wanted to, we can't achieve that, and if God wanted to, God couldn't bestow any good upon us. There are certain laws into which we must come, and as we come into the oneness with these laws, they fulfill themselves in us. The beginning of all this wisdom is, of course, the realization of, well, that the kingdom of God is within me and that it must learn to flow out from me, not be sought to bring it to us even through prayer or even from God. Then, as we achieve that, as we develop this sense, there's nothing can come to me from God. Nothing. There's nothing to be expected. God's work cannot have anything to do with time or space. God's work must have been done in the beginning before ever Abraham was. Before ever time began, God's work was done, completed as our individual being. Then, as we stop seeking, as we stop desiring, as we merely go into God for the sake of a communion, then that good which is in the relationship of communion begins to flow. Just as if we should go to each other in friendship and with friendship, out of that friendship a good would begin to evolve. It didn't come from God or go from any place. It evolved out of the relationship that we call friendship. Then there comes an exchange of good from one to another. And whatever thing one has, one shares with the other. Whatever their quality is, they share with the one. And so there is an interchange. But what brought it to light? The relationship of friendship. It is the same thing in all other relationships. In marriage, wherever there is a true marriage, just the relationship of marriage itself brings out certain qualities that are inherent in the relationship marriage. Without marriage, that relationship wouldn't be, and the particular forms of good couldn't be. Well, so it is. In one's relationship with God, there are certain forms of good that inhere and that unfold and flow just through the relationship. Nothing else. The relationship itself brings forth this inherent good. And so it is that in living in this conscious union with God, in living in this conscious communion with God, in this realization of oneness, looking unto me and be saved. Look unto me and be saved. Do we seek another? No. Only me, the spiritual center of being. It alone is the source of good. Then, in that relationship of oneness, the flow takes place. Can you not see that any expectation, then, of good coming to one would be the very instrument that would separate one from that good? But that a constant seeking within for greater opportunities to let flow, to express, to share, would be that thing. Then would come the natural instinct of gratitude. Do you see? Then gratitude has its place, because gratitude then has nothing to do with an expectancy of tomorrow. Gratitude has to do with the sharing or expressing of a joy that had to do with yesterday. Then every expression of gratitude would be a complete release without a single sign or trace of desire for return. But that is not easy to achieve. There again, the mesmerism of the world, which has taught us to give in order that we may receive, comes right into the picture. It is an age-old thing. Give and you shall receive. Do you see that? And it isn't so. It isn't so. Give because you have received. Give because you have an abundance. Give because you have love and gratitude to overflowing. No matter what it is, we're speaking of any form of giving, even if it's giving forgiveness, understanding, consideration, kindness, generosity, love, peace, harmony. Then comes the transformation in consciousness which reveals one's Christhood. Now watch. Christhood never receives. There is no record in the entire New Testament of Jesus seeking health or wealth or recognition or reward or fame or payment or gratitude. The Christ is completely an activity of shining. That's why Christhood is often referred to as the light. Light can't receive a thing. Light is a flowing. Light is an expressing. Light is an outpouring. So is Christhood. Christhood never has any provision within itself for receiving anything. Christhood is itself the infinity of God in individual expression. Therefore, Christhood is, well, it is very much like integrity. Integrity is that which just pours itself out, but it doesn't look for any return. It isn't like honesty is the best policy. You see, that is not integrity, that's honesty. But integrity is quite a different thing. Integrity is never a quality of being that is seeking a reward or seeking a return. Integrity is a state of being for no other reason than being. So is Christhood. In achieving even a tiny measure of Christhood, there is no longer a self which needs to be served. Christhood is a servant, not a master. Christhood is that which bestows, gives, shares, lets the Godhood flow. But it has nothing to receive in return because it already has the fullness of the Godhead bodily, and that's what constitutes Christhood. The moment an individual would give thought to a return, to seeking, they would be in humanhood again. They would not be in Christhood, because Christhood is the fullness of the Godhead bodily made individually manifest. Now, as an individual expresses integrity, not in order to get a return, but because it is the nature of their being, so it is in Christhood that one lives their lives as an instrument through which God can pour itself out in its fullness. Now, when we individually have that understanding of our true being, that in understanding our union with God, our oneness with God, that we thereby have the infinity of God, that breaks off all contact with this outside world in the sense of desiring, wanting, seeking, getting, achieving. Do you see that? And that is the state of Christhood in which God is the meat that I have that the world knows nothing about. That is achieving that state of being. I have meat the world knows nothing of. I am the water of life. I could give you water. I don't need the well of water. I can give you water, says Christhood. I am the wine, says Christhood. Not I need wine, not I need inspiration. I am the wine. I am the bread of life. I am the staff of life. I embody, include, embrace within myself the bread of life, the wine, the water, and therefore there is no need to look out here, but you come to me, and I, out of Christhood, will give you it. Now, at this stage of our development and unfoldment, if we are to be the peculiar people, those who have come out and become separate, those who are to be a light unto the rest of the world, we must in some, even if it's only our tiny measure, achieve the realization of our Christhood, which means achieve the realization of our oneness with God, through which this allness flows. Do you see that? Then, in that degree, you will watch what happens as you never meet a person out here from whom you're seeking anything. Watch the difference in their reaction to you as they know that you are walking the street without a single thought or idea of getting anything or achieving anything or desiring or wanting anything from them, but eager to share that which unfolds from the Father within you. And you'll see the whole attitude of the world change toward you as we change from being getters to being sharers of the Father's life. In this connection, it becomes necessary to watch, because sometimes an egotistical sense comes up that, oh, I am doing this and I am sharing this, and well, I guess now I am on the right track. That's very dangerous. Very dangerous. Watch that no I gets into that picture, because no I must ever be involved in it. At no time are we anything but instruments through which the fullness, no time do we have anything of our own, whether it's of wisdom or understanding or spirituality. Never, never. As people will compliment us in the external and praise us and so forth, let us always receive those expressions with thanks and inwardly a little smile, which is the acknowledgement that it's the Father and not the self. Do you see that? Otherwise, the word I gets in and becomes another block. It is like our 15th century mystic said there when he was asked, why is there sin, disease, and death on earth if God is the all in all and God is good? Oh, he says, it all comes from I amness. And there too, you see, he wrote a whole book in one sentence. All of the discords and inharmonies of the world come from I amness, from the sense that I am a source, or I am a founder, or I am something or other, which I am not. The Father is, and that which I am is but the instrument of the Father's appearing. Remember that, the instrument of the Father's appearing, the instrument of the Father's glory, the instrument of the Father's light, the instrument of the Father, the lamp through which the light may shine, and so forth and so forth and so on. In this realization of the infinity of God being omnipresent through God's grace, and the ability to not look out upon the world for any good, comes also the ability not to resent the activity of others in either our experience or in the experience of the world. At first, it is much easier to overcome resentment and rebellion at those who visit injustice or iniquities upon us, but it is still difficult to watch those who are in a position to do it and do it, visit these injustices and iniquities upon a defenseless world. That is where our righteous rebellion rises up, and we feel that we also would like to take the whip to the money changers. Not because they are taking anything from us. We have already achieved the realization of the infinite nature of our being, and so nothing can be taken from us. But as we see the poor, the ignorant, the illiterate being taken advantage of, or those in theological darkness, we see them being taken advantage of by the superstitious teachings, and there is still a sense of rebellion and a desire to cleanse the temple. And it takes the Master's highest unfoldment to come to the realization, well, if that's what you need as a lesson for now, you'll have to take that as a lesson until you awaken. And even then, the desire to save the world disappears. As a matter of fact, eventually it says, if I go not away, the Comforter will not come to you. We are today destroying the sense of dependence on person, place, or thing out here for our good. We are also destroying today a greater sin, that of concern for the evil that others would do unto us, since we have released ourselves from cause and effect in person, are drawing our good from the Father within and allowing those out here to be benefited by that first part of the Matthew 25, inasmuch as they have done it unto the least of these my brethren, it is also being done so unto them. Inasmuch as they are neglecting to do it unto the least of these my brethren, it is likewise being neglected to return unto them, except in proportion as they have sent out. Oh, these are such important points that we have covered today, and the grace of God has been good to us. Regardless of what things we may be led to do as being a blessing to this world or to individuals in our experience, let us remember this. The greatest blessing we can be is to seek the few moments of separation from the world, so that this contact may be made and that aroma be permitted to escape. At first, the sense is that we, though, aren't doing anything. Eventually, you'll see that in that we doing nothing, we are doing more than these others. Because actually it is an invisible presence and power which unfortunately can't be seen, tasted, touched, or smelled, because it would be a wonderful thing to have some human awareness of it and witness it at work, but we can't. It's completely an invisible thing. Yet, in just having that momentary sense of release, we have made room for the whole presence and power of God to flow out from us, whether into this room, into that garden, out into the street, or out into the consciousness of all those who are within range of our thought. I am ever with thee. You see, there's a different I. That's a different I than we've been talking about before. There's an interference. The moment that says itself, not we declare it, the moment it says itself within us, I am with thee. I am on the scene. I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. The moment we hear it or sense it or become aware of it, that is the announcing. Call it the Annunciation. That is the announcing of the very activity, presence, and power of God. Watch out that it isn't being said by you. Do not say I with the mind. But if you can be vacant enough inside so as to hear I, or get the sense that I is declaring itself, that I is announcing itself in a feeling, in an emotion, or in a word, or in a thought, or in just a release, in whatever way it will come, as long as you are not saying the word I, as long as it is you becoming aware of the word I. Do you see the difference? Therein lies the whole secret of spiritual living. Every prophet, every saint, every seer, every sage has heard the voice of God. Whether in audible hearing or not makes no difference. Everyone has caught that sense of God announcing itself, voicing itself, and that constitutes the spiritual message and the spiritual messenger and the spiritual presence and the spiritual power of any age or of any person's experience. That was it. Thank you.